My task as we begin this meeting is to set forth some common foundations for the more focused panel presentations and discussions that will take place over the next 3 days. Why? Because, as Pam pointed out, research on the challenges of sustainable development has blossomed over the last several decades. The diversity of disciplines and perspectives that have gathered under this big tent of sustainability science have generated a sort of hybrid vigor that has generally served us very well. But our disparate origins have also sometimes left us only partially aware of one another's contributions, divided by our distinctive jargons, journals, and preoccupations. I'm as guilty as anyone of the resulting parochialism. Recently, however, I had the privilege of spending a long sabbatical wallowing in the diverse literatures of sustainability, and literatures ranging from livelihood security and global biogeochemical cycles, from environmental justice to natural capital determinants, from land use change to socio-technical transitions, and so on and on and on. With my colleague Alicia Harley, I sought to identify generalizable insights from those literatures that, if more widely shared, could provide a common foundation on which all could build in future work. The annual review of environmental resources just published our conclusions in an open access paper listed along with a companion piece by Carl Folke and his colleagues in the background readings for this workshop. Here, I will summarize our conclusions in hopes that they can provide some useful foundations and points of departure for the panel discussions that are the central feature of this workshop. Next slide, please. Sustainability science is a problem-driven field of research, like agricultural science or health science before it. The problem it is trying to solve is sustainable development. This was defined a generation ago by the Brundtland Commission in language that has stood the test of time. Environment is where we live. Development is what we all do in attempting to improve our lot within that abode. The two are inseparable. Humanity has the ability to make development sustainable, to ensure that it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The question remains, but how? Answers to this question ultimately lie in the realm of action. The role of science is to inform such action, addressing such questions as, where are our present trends taking us? What can be done to guide or bend those trends towards sustainability? Useful answers to such questions are almost always context-specific. But research on sustainability is now sufficiently mature that we know some of the elements and relationships that have turned out to figure prominently in understanding and explaining specific situations. These findings merit our attention in future efforts to craft specific solutions or to build mid-range theory or explanations about whole classes of cases. So I summarize some of the most important of these findings in our next 10 slides. Next slide, please. So nature and society are increasingly intertwined in a co-evolving system. The co-evolution relevant to sustainability is that which occurs over multiple generations. Studying either nature or society as though the other were a constant boundary condition is unlikely to help understand pathways of development over the intergenerational periods relevant to sustainable development. In particular, this means that the various hyphenated sustainabilities that surround us, environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, corporate sustainability, and the like, are not only meaningless but also misleading. The proper use of sustainability is in reference to the pathway of development of the whole intertwined nature-society system. Next slide, please. A second major finding regards goals. Goals clearly merit special attention by any science seeking solutions to problems. As noted earlier, a globally shared goal for sustainable development has emerged through repeated rounds of social deliberation over the last 30-plus years. Its essence is that development should be fair or equitable. That is, it should aim to improve the well-being of people in the here and now, but should do so in ways that do not unfairly jeopardize the ability of people elsewhere or in the future to improve their own well-being, for instance, by dumping our junk in their backyards. That said, comparative and historical studies of development show us that the particular constituents of well-being that people most want to improve vary across space and time. A major challenge for sustainability science today is therefore how to craft and evaluate solutions that do not assume that our grandchildren, or for that matter, our neighbors, will value the same constituents of well-being as we do now. Next slide, please. A further finding regards resources and people's access to them. Resources have proven a useful way of thinking about the ultimate determinants of well-being and thus of sustainable development. That said, it has become increasingly clear that a narrow view of what constitutes relevant resources, for example, a view restricted to the marketed goods and services included in calculations of GNP, will mislead efforts to pursue sustainability. Sustainability science research has shown the value of taking a broad and inclusive view of the resources contributing to well-being, a view that includes not only the more traditional anthropogenic resources, human capital, manufactured capital, social capital, and knowledge capital, but also natural resources such as minerals, ecosystems, and climate. Challenges remain in determining how sustainability assessments should address the partial substitutability and trade-offs among these resources and differential access to them. Next slide. Consumption-production relationships, somewhat surprisingly to me, have proven a powerful lens for understanding how the potential of resources to support well-being is actually realized in practice. Too much of our research has focused only on production or only on consumption activities, and as a result has provided incomplete or even distorted understanding of what shapes and can guide long-term development pathways. In current parlance, production of vaccines doesn't stop infection, only the consumption of vaccines does. More rewarding have been efforts that take a balanced view of consumption-production relationships, exploring how consumption demands are shaped and in turn shape production activities, and reciprocally, how new production possibilities can change patterns of consumption demand. An example worth emulating in other sectors is almost certainly the trend of energy service providers to explore both the supply, that is the production, and the demand, that is the consumption, options for reducing their use of key scarce resources. Next slide, please. Governance is required if consumption-production arrangements are to advance well-being equitably rather than benefiting the few to the detriment of the many, which they do in many cases today. The most illuminating research on governance for sustainability has included attention to institutions, that is, rules, norms, and culture, to the actors who shape those institutions, and to the relative power, usually inequitably distributed, of some actors to control the beliefs and the behaviors of others. Among other things, this work has confirmed that knowledge is indeed power. In particular, it's shown that one of the many ways in which a few actors accumulate disproportionate power over others is through their influence on what questions scientists ask, what evidence is made available, what and who has meaningful access to research results. Researchers can therefore too easily become complicit, consciously or not, in reinforcing existing power inequities together with the agendas and interests of the already powerful. Given the centrality of equity to sustainable development goals, we sustainability researchers need to take special care to reflect on whose agendas our work is in fact serving, whose power it is supporting, and what our research can do to empower those who are unfairly losing out along current development pathways. Next slide, please. Most empirical research on sustainability has focused on specific places or sectors in recognition of the context dependence of nature-society interactions and their governance. This is a sensible research approach. But too often, it has also led us to forget that other places and other sectors are going on with their development at the same time. Connections among these sites may nonetheless exist and may be important for understanding and guiding sustainability. Nonetheless, most sustainability studies, surprisingly, still ignore them. Ways forward are being shown by various nexus studies, work on teleconnections, and analyses of extended networks among actors. But sustainability research needs to be asking more systematically in all of its studies whose resources particular places or sectors are acquiring, where they are sending their junk, and whether those and other neighborly connections are established in a fair and equitable manner, or rather an inequitable one. Next slide, please. Nature-society interactions constitute complex adaptive systems. As such, they are characterized by the persistent heterogeneity or diversity of nature-society interactions, the local but incomplete connections among those localities, autonomous selection processes by which features of some localities achieve greater replication or spread than others. These selection processes include surely natural selection, but also such things as venture capitalists out hunting for unicorns. The fundamental characteristics of complex nature-society interactions yield three things: a hierarchical structure to our Anthropocene nature-society systems, the perpetual generation of novelty and innovations at the micro scale, and the mediation of selection for what will go viral at the mesoscale by macro-level trends. For example, climate warming, undermining dominant modes of agricultural production at the mesoscale, and thus providing openings for local innovations. Next slide, please. The result of this complexity is pathway dynamics that are far from equilibrium, that are path-dependent, but capable of inhabiting multiple behavioral regimes. And these regimes are separated by thresholds that can be crossed due to external shocks or transformative interventions. Pathways of development can thus be understood, but cannot be fully predicted or hardwired in ways that can assure sustainability. Next slide, please. Precisely because pathways of development for our complex nature-society systems cannot be fully predicted in advance, the pursuit of sustainability also requires operational capacities for learning by doing. Six such capacities have emerged as foci of substantial sustainability research and are the focus of this workshop. The first is the capacity to measure sustainable development so that we can assess whether present trends are in fact sustainable and whether proposed interventions would in fact make them more so. The second capacity is one to promote equity because, despite the centrality of equity to sustainable development goals, both research and practice are lagging behind in understanding what causes inequity or in building mechanisms to enhance it. Third is the capacity to adapt, because shocks and surprises are an inevitable feature of our uncertain pathways of development. Fourth is the capacity to transform development pathways, because we may find that the ones we are on are not sustainable and must be fundamentally altered to become more so. Fifth, the capacity to link knowledge with action, because too little of the science we do produce gets used, and too little of the knowledge most needed by frontline agents of sustainability gets produced by scientists. Finally, the capacity to govern, because we need to be able to work cooperatively in order to bring the other capacities to bear on crafting and implementing sustainability solutions. Research has shown that all of these capacities are interlinked and interdependent. Fostering some without the others will almost certainly fail to promote sustainability as well as we need. Progress in strengthening these capacities, on the other hand, would benefit a wide range of efforts to promote sustainability solutions, from better energy systems to better urban settlements to more sustainable use of our agricultural resources. This workshop has been designed to explore the various perspectives that frontline researchers from around the world are bringing to bear on these operational capacities needed for the pursuit of sustainability. Personally, I expect to find myself on a steep learning curve. I invite you to join me.